In our current climate, it may seem frightening to imagine an environment where you'd be willing to pay money to stand elbow to elbow with strangers in a crowded environment for fun. But if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, then you know the arcade was a magical place. Arcades almost died, but with a glimmer of nostalgia and an appreciation for IRL social gaming, arcade bars, retrocades, and entertainment centers have been experiencing a rebirth. However, with most still shut down due to state restrictions, sometimes it takes losing everything to truly appreciate how good it was. In this episode of the show, we're looking at the best-selling arcade games of all time. Insert coin. This is Wayback Attack.
Welcome to Wayback Attack. My name is Brian Grantham, and sitting across from me in cyberspace, as always, recently, is Preston Burke. Preston, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm excited. I'm a little stressed. We got this Twitch thing going on for the first time ever. But, other than that, it's pretty much how it's been for the past few weeks here in isolation in each of our houses. So it's good to connect every week with you. And I'm excited that we actually have some folks following along live tonight on Twitch.
I cannot believe it. This is the first episode where I forgot to come up with a great pun. So
I'm glad you didn't. Because do you know how much that stresses me out every time? Because I have no idea what he's going to say. And every time I have to come up with a quip afterwards. But so just to be asked, how's it going? I almost wasn't prepared for that.
I wanted to say something like, do you got Pac-Man fever or something? But, I don't. There was one time, I don't remember which episode it was, but I said something that I had said before. And so we had to redo it because of that. But, hey, that makes this episode special because this will be the only one where there's no clever intro. So
you're going to be prepped for it next time.
Yep. I gotta start being like the guy in Memento and start tattooing them all over my body so that way I can be like, all right, I'm ready.
Oh, that's great. So speaking of Memento, you've been watching any cool movies lately? How you been spending your time in isolation?
So recently, I have gotten a bunch of cables and everything. I'm going to wire my house tomorrow with Cat 6, and that way. I'm going to give every room three data ports, and then I'll have some stuff left over so that when I finish the basement, we'll be able to wire the basement as well. So I have been getting ready to do that, but recently,
for a while.
Yeah. Well, I just ordered that stuff last week. I was going to do it on Sunday. I was too tired after work, and so I figured, Sunday I started watching the new, or no, I guess it's not new anymore, the Wu-Tang show, and I've been all about that recently, and so, but yeah, that, and I recently got the Final Fantasy VII remake, and so I'm going to start playing that after I get done wiring the house tomorrow. So.
That's
what
cool.
about you?
Yeah, you told me about the Wu-Tang Clan show yesterday, and I'm excited for it, but then seeing that it's 11 episodes, I don't know if I'm ready to get into something like that. That seems like a commitment.
It flies.
Is it an hour long?
Yes.
Okay.
That's very good, though.
I told you when I saw you that I was reminded recently of the Wu-Tang Clan because someone shared on Reddit that clip from the Chappelle show where they have the racial draft. Where the different races claim different minority people. And it was really funny that the Asians claimed the Wu-Tang Clan for their own. It was great. But no, what I really want to watch is The Last Dance, the Bulls documentary. But I don't have ESPN, so I got to wait till it comes out. I think it's coming out on a different streaming service like Hulu or Amazon or something in July. So I'll wait until that. But
I'm going to guess Disney Plus.
I don't know. Maybe.
Since they own ESPN, it only makes sense.
It does make sense. So, like I mentioned at the top of the show, we are live on Twitch right now. And I figured since we are on Twitch, which is a gaming platform for live streaming games, better to have a gaming themed episode for the show. This is actually Brian's idea, but I'm glad we had it because I've been wanting to talk about games for a while. But if you listened to us previously, then you know that we both come off of another podcast that I co-founded with my friend Patrick called Game Room Junkies podcast. We went for like 8 years, 75 episodes. It was a mostly monthly show, talking about arcade and pinball machines, and then divulged into different gamings. And we brought Brian on in the later episodes to talk about console corner and stuff. So I love gaming. I talk about it a lot, collected it for a long time, but kind of wanted to have a little bit of a separation between those podcasts so that we can kind of establish ourselves as a, just a fun retro nostalgia show that's not just about gaming, although we'll probably talk about it from time to time. But I thought Twitch, first episode, good topic.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for this, Brian?
Well, it basically goes along with that. So we had talked about, since we are going to also do the show streaming on Twitch, come up with some gaming thing. And I figured, well, it'll work well to do a game, because we like to try to do games on episodes. And so since it's a gaming episode, the entire episode really is going to be a game. And the we'll get some classic retro games on tonight's episode as well. And so it just kind of marries everything together. And a lot like how you were talking about, you had that other podcast where it was about, pinballs and arcades and that kind of stuff. And, I figured it's a nice time to, like, this is our 20th actual episode, like not counting the in-betweens. And so it's a nice round number. So
I can't believe we've been 20 episodes already. It took like 4 years to get to 20 episodes on the other podcast. That's great. Funny. Yeah, so you said this whole episode's going to be a game? Like, what's the game?
Yep. So I gave you the essentially a list of games. And so what we are going to do is come up with, we're going to list out the games. So the reason I gave them to you ahead of time was so that you can think about it. And I want you to basically see if you can figure out the top 10 best-selling arcade games in order from worst to best, okay? And so the games that we have are Outrun, Asteroids, Street Fighter II, Galaxian, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede, Donkey Kong, Defender, and Space Invaders. So think about those games, which ones.
Nice.
We have some, they're all legendary, right? And so, but there are some of them pretty big stretch of time and difference for that comes into play for some of it. Some games came out in the 70s, some of them came out in Street Fighter 2
in the 90s.
90, yeah. So
yeah,
91 maybe, but
okay. So we'll talk about them and then hit it back up at the end to see if I can get them in order. I actually know a couple of these production runs just from my own knowledge. And then I stumbled upon one through the research for today. But hey, it's still going to be a crapshoot, and if I'm lucky, I'll do about half or just over half correct. So we'll see. But who knows? Hey, if you got that video clip queued up, let's play that cool video addiction clip.
Well, they come as if from outer space in a variety of weird guises. Defender, Pac-Man, Asteroids. To fans, they represent a challenge. But to critics, as Terry Drinkwater reports, they are a menace.
Come on in. It's almost another world here in the video arcades of America. 1 billion games are played every month, a quarter each for Escape, which can last a long time if you're skilled. Pit yourself against the computer. Millions, mostly teenagers, have. So many, in fact, that psychologists are beginning to worry that some youths are becoming spaced out on the space games.
You can't get hooked on it.
Are you?
Yeah. It keeps on making you play the game. Once you start to play it for a while, you keep on playing it.
Any normal person would want to beat the machine.
And you come back?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Yeah.
Many cities have reacted by making the arcades off limits to all under 17 from 8 to 3. This is the after-school rush in Oakland. Long hours at the screens, psychologists say, can lead to extreme introversion. Youngsters communicating in a video fantasy land and not with their peers or parents.
It's not addictive in the sense of a drug dependency where you're going to have withdrawal symptoms, but it is physically, you can become physically dependent upon it because you get an arousal and then a relaxation response. It's the same as a roller coaster
All right, so that guy there at the end talking about the parts of your addiction, he reminds me of the guy from Ghostbusters that works for the
EPA.
Yeah, EPA.
Yeah, he's got that vibe. Yeah, it's so funny. Every generation, there's something that is the plague of the youth. That's this addictive thing, and it's going to rot your brains or it's going to cause violence. And now you just look back at it, it seems so quaint.
Yeah.
People worrying about Pac-Man ruining you forever.
Well, you know, it's funny because a lot of that stuff has to do with things that, I guess for the past, like, let's say almost around 100 years, it's been some form of gaming, right? Because, you know, like early pinballs and I guess even before that, you had like card games and that kind of stuff that people, it was always something that, you know, idle hands do the devil's work type of deal. And so using your idle hands to play games is a negative thing. So,
well, you and I have the lucky distinction of being able to have to remember playing some of these earliest games. Now, you know, like we mentioned, some of these games came out in the 70s, early 80s. We would have barely been born in the early 80s, so didn't get to experience them at their height. But a lot of us have. I mean, we've had a lot of experience on them, though. What was your very first memory of an arcade game?
My very first memory of an arcade game, I think, you know, it probably has to do with Donkey Kong. And that's probably why I have such an affinity for that. Either that or Pac-Man, because I was super into Pac-Man. But like to this day, like just the sounds of Donkey Kong like trigger something that just like is like soothing to me. Like to hear like the whole like doo, 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 and like the boom boom boom. I don't know, something about that. But Pac-Man, I know when I was a kid, I had Pac-Man sheets and bedspread and posters and everything. So I'm really a fan of like the art, like the drawn out Pac-Man, not necessarily the end game Pac-Man, but something about that. What about you?
For me, it was so it's funny. My earliest memory of playing an arcade game was playing Galaga in this hot dog shop called Scooters in Lake Bluff, Illinois. It was in the town adjacent to where we lived. So that was probably when I was about 5. But it's funny enough, but my Galaga was actually not my first game. My mom has a picture of me playing Leprechaun. Do you know the game Leprechaun?
Nope.
So Leprechaun is a game that was a Moppet game, which was a miniature kid-sized arcade cabinet. And I played this because when I was a kid, I was really sick with some mystery illness. And my dad was doing his postdoctoral work at Stanford. And so I was admitted to the hospital out there in Palo Alto in California. And they actually had Moppet arcade games for kids to play in the hospital. So there's a picture of me playing a Leprechaun Moppet arcade game. I don't remember that at all, of course, but it's cool to have the picture, like my first arcade experience on film.
What kind of game is Leprechaun? Is it a like a maze game?
I don't remember, honestly.
The when you were telling that story and you said it was at a hot dog and the way you paused, I thought you were gonna say in a hot dog costume. I don't know why, but just picturing you sitting there playing a game like dressed up as a hot dog.
I mean, that seems like an appropriate wardrobe for playing arcade games, but yeah, I mean, to each their own.
Well,
all right, so go ahead.
I was gonna say, what I wanted to do is take, you know, hopefully everybody's been thinking about the list of games, and I'll read it off to you again. and then I'm going to ask you what you think your number 10 game is, okay? So for the list of games, we have Outrun, Asteroids, Street Fighter 2, Galaxian, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Centipede, Donkey Kong, Defender, and Space Invaders. So Preston, what do you think the number 10 game is?
Okay, so I'm basing it off of the fact that I know that the golden age of arcades, when they sold the most, it was like bananas out there, was in the early 80s. Okay. So knowing that, our two games that come the latest in time are Street Fighter 2 and Outrun.
Okay.
Now, Street Fighter 2 was a total like rebirth, reinvention of the games, arcades. And Outrun, while it's good, it came out in '86, which was not a huge time for arcade gaming. So I'm actually going to go number 10, Outrun.
All right. Well, number 10 is Outrun. So
yes,
there are some really cool things about Outrun. It really brought forth some new technology in racing games, which you kind of see it a little bit with pole position, but the way that they draw on the like the incoming sides of the track and stuff like that, I don't remember what it's called, but I know that was done in a special way. And so Outrun was really popular, I think, for part of that reason, and the fact that you can change the radio station in it was something new also.
Yes. Yeah. I loved this game as a kid. I, of course, had played Pole Position and Pole Position 2, and those were cool. Just being able to drive a steering wheel and control a gas pedal was really cool. But this one, it doesn't look so now, but the graphics on it were actually really, really cool for 1986. And then it just seems such more like faster and hipper than Pole Position did. And then, like you mentioned, the music was fantastic, and it was a Ferrari, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, and it actually had the Ferrari logo on the steering wheel, which is a common thing to be missing on an arcade game because kids actually stole them off of there. But not only could you control the steering wheel, but it had the shifter on it. It had and it had force feedback on the steering wheel. So when you like went off into the side, it would shake and let you know that you had gone off the smooth road. So that was really cool. And it had a cool cabinet shape. It was very bright, colorful. It had a cool dashboard. Yeah, it was a great game all around.
Yeah, I did very poorly in that, but I still came in 19th place, son. But one of the things I thought was cool, and you could kind of see it there at the end, was they did you had branching paths, and so depending on what path you took, like the track looked different, right? So like there were some that you went through cities, and then some like you went through the outside of the city and into these like rocky columns and that kind of thing. And I always thought that was really neat, being able to choose which way you wanted to go. I think it makes sense that the Outrun made it into the top 10 list, just because at the time it was a pretty big breath of fresh air for racing games, and it kind of changed the way that companies started making racing games and that kind of thing. So plus, let me see.
Well, I love that it has a legacy into the present.
Yeah.
Which is that because you could change the radio station, and because of the digital nature of it, it is a subgenre of synthwave. So you can go search Outrun synthwave, and not only can you actually still buy the soundtrack, which I thought was interesting. Like Sega actually still produces the soundtrack. You can go to Amazon right now and buy the Outrun arcade game soundtrack and listen to these tunes, but it's inspired that whole genre of music. And you can go to YouTube and search Outrun synthwave and find like this whole plethora of brand new music that was inspired by this game.
Yeah, and the I wrecked a couple times there just because I wanted to show off the cool like flipping car animation and the people flying out of it. I always liked that when I was a kid. But yeah, so
I thought you were just going to be playing videos of gameplay. You're actually playing these games?
Yeah, boy.
Okay.
That's how we do.
Mad respect to Brian. If you're just listening, you can't experience this. Brian is is not only talking on the podcast, he's also operating our screens, operating our videos, and now playing games while we're talking on the podcast. So you're a wizard over there. You're a wizard, Brian.
You're a wizard, Harry. There it goes. I was having issues closing it so I can get the next one ready. So, but yeah, I also have here, I wanted to tell you about it. Outrun, they sold 30,000 cabinets. So the revenue by 1993, they had done $393 million. And so if you adjust that for inflation, that's 665.85. So we'll round it up $666 million in cabinets for Outrun. So just to give you an idea of the kind of numbers that we're dealing with here. So
dang, we do have a little bit of a controversy in the chat. The Roarbots said that Rad Racer was way better, which I don't know. I guess on the Nintendo it was, but since Rad Racer wasn't an arcade game, I mean they had Radmobile, but they didn't have Rad Racer, so I don't know if it's a 1-to-1 comparison because we're doing arcade games, and for the record, arcade games had much better processing power than their console system counterparts. So I'm just gonna have to say we agree to disagree on this one.
I will say Rad Racer was awesome because you could hit select and then it would put it into 3D mode, because when you bought the game new, it came with 3D glasses. And so so that was always really cool also. So
and it had some interactivity with the Power Glove. So hey, little bonus.
All right.
It didn't work quite like you wanted it to, but it was still something.
Nothing ever did with the Power Glove. So all right, so number 10 was Outrun. Preston, what do you think number 9 is?
All right. Number 9, based on my previous theory, based on time frame, I'm going to have to go with Street Fighter 2. I don't wait. 2. Don't ruin it. I'm going to go with Street Fighter 2 just because it came out the latest and it's outside of the boom, but it sounds like I'm wrong.
Yep, you're wrong. So
oh no. Let me give my second.
Okay, go for it.
Let me give my second choice.
Go for it.
Second choice would be, Defender.
Defender. No, it is a space shooter, but it is not Defender. Okay. It is Galaxian. So, Galaxian winds up being the number 9th best-selling arcade game of all time. What are your thoughts on Galaxian?
Wow.
What are your thoughts on Galaxian?
Let's see. Okay, yeah, we were lagging there for a second. So, Galaxian, it's no Galaga. That's my thoughts on that. It came before Galaga. So it has some of that similar style of gameplay to it, but it's just not as fast, not as quick. It was interesting in the fact that it was, I believe, the first RGB game ever made. So it was a true color game, whereas most games prior to that, and another one we'll talk on the list, we'll talk about both a true black and white game in Asteroids, but also a color overlay game in Space Invaders, where it was a black and white CRT, but they had like a gel overlay on the actual tube, so it looked like it was in color in parts of it. But this was the first one where it's actually programmed for color. So it had some technological innovations, which I appreciate for sure.
Yeah, and Galaxian is interesting just because, like, you would understandably, with the popularity of other games like Space Invaders and stuff, like space shooters like this were huge back then. So of course, like, there were so many clones of that same style. But with having the space bugs flying at your ship and stuff like that, it brought a different level, just because of you now have to dodge them shooting at you and flying at you, and that changes like the path of the projectiles and that kind of thing. But you also see like how this paved the way for Galaga, which I agree with you that Galaga is a far superior game. But
yeah, well, so arcade collector nerd out here, I do appreciate its cabinet, the actual cabinet, because those early Bally Midway cabinets are great because a lot of them are plywood, so they're sturdy, but they're also a little bit lighter.
Yes.
It's got a cool like curvature to it on the trim line, and it's got a full side art that's really, really awesome, of the space bugs and stuff. It looks really cool. So it's green and blue and white, mostly white. If you haven't seen the side art, check that out. So I appreciate it on that from an artistic level, and from the cabinetry itself. But yeah, it's no Galaga. And I'm actually shocked in saying that now. I'm looking at the list, and Galaga isn't on here at all. It's not one of the top 10. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, let me see something.
What kind of crap list are you sharing here, Brian?
Hey, maybe just because Galaga wasn't out long enough for it to hit the list. So, I will say Galaxian. The Galaxian is number 9. They sold 40,000 cabinets for that game. So, is a pretty big title. Unfortunately, for some reason I didn't have, or I guess the article that I pulled this from was from
Goliath.com.
Yes, Goliath.com. And so they did not have sales numbers for that game. All the other ones have it. So, but it did 10,000 more copies than Outrun did. So, hey, that's a pretty good deal for me. All right.
Yeah.
We are coming down to number 8. What do you think your number 8? And just while you're thinking about it, so we've knocked off Galaxian, knocked off Outrun. So number 8, what do you think it's going to be?
I'm going to have to go with... I'm sticking with Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 2. Okay. That is an interesting choice because, like you said, Street Fighter 2 revolutionized gaming in the arcades. So, but unfortunately, you're incorrect again. So, what we've got is the Exterminator of Centipede. You were talking about
Centipede.
Yeah. You were talking about the how
Dude,
you like the cabinets for Galaxian because they're plywood, and unlike Atari ones that are made out of super heavy wood. It's the heaviest material that Atari could find that they wanted to make their cabinets out of. So they are by far the worst arcade machines to move around.
Oh, and they're super tall. Yeah, they're a pain in the butt. But the game itself is a good game. Most importantly, it's a trackball game.
Yes.
So the gameplay style itself was unique for the time, and still continues to be like something that draws people to it. I actually have a Centipede game in my arcade. It is a cabaret miniature version, and it's currently non-working. But whenever it is working and people come over to the house, that's one they always remember, and that's one that draws kids and adults because it's so easy to learn, hard to master, and it's got the cool trackball. So it's pretty cool.
There's also nothing quite as satisfying. Oh, that spider got me. There's also nothing quite as satisfying as, let me see if I can do it. The spider wants to do me in, so it's making it difficult. But when you get them to start coming down like in a straight little row and you're just like popping them off like one at a time like that, that's my favorite part of that game.
Oh yeah, it's good. So interestingly enough, this game is one of the few rarities that was actually designed by a female. So this is designed by Caroline Bailey and Ed Logg. And Caroline Bailey, she only designed this game. Then she went to work for Cinti Technologies. So she did some stuff for Cinti and did some contract work for Activision. But this was really her only game of note. And then she went off to work in education and did that for the remainder of her career. She's retired now, and has gotten some recognition here lately, but her name wasn't one of the most common for the longest time. And she's shopping around a script to try to get made for like the tale of either her life or just the time of being a designer back in the early 80s. It's called Sunnyvale. You can find her on Twitter. Search up Donna Bailey. She's pretty cool. She's pretty active on Twitter. She'll interact with you and stuff. It's pretty fun.
I thought you were gonna say that she was writing a script for a Centipede movie. I was gonna be like, that would be insane. Like, I know that they've did Rampage recently and try to come out with other video game movies, but
I think Centipede was featured in Pixels, wasn't it?
Probably. I never saw Pixels. I know.
Oh, Brian.
Hey, I'm just not a fan of Adam Sandler. I like Little Nicky. That was good. All right. So, do you have any loving memories of Centipede?
No, like I said, it was just one of the few trackball games. There was Rampart, which was a trackball game.
Yes.
Missile Command was a trackball game, but like this one, if you had to name one, this was probably it.
Yeah.
So.
What about Millipede? Do you like Millipede better than Centipede?
No, not a huge fan of the Millipede.
I will say, so for Centipede, they sold 55,988 cabinets of that game. The revenue by 1991 was $115.65 million. So adjusting for inflation, it's $207.85 million for Centipede cabinets.
My word.
I think it's like some of these dates on these is crazy because where they like I guess only sold them for like a couple years or whatever compared to the like that one for like 91. So all right.
Yeah, I'm surprised because this is a game where in arcade collecting circles, like Centipede has been converted into so many different other games that Centipede cabinets just seem like there's way more of them than there are Galaxians or even Defenders. It feels like there's more Centipedes than Defenders out there, but I guess we're wrong.
More love for Centipede.
Maybe.
All right. So, what do you think the next game's going to be there, Preston?
I'm so wrong. Dude, I don't even know anymore.
You got Outrun, right? So far, we've had number 10 was Outrun, number 9 Galaxian, number 8 Centipede, number 7. What are you feeling?
Number 7, I'm going to go with...
Don't say Street Fighter.
No, I'm not. I'm going to go with Ms. Pac-Man.
Ms. Pac-Man. Well, it turns out that it's actually Defender.
I just didn't want to say that one again. That's what I thought, but I didn't want to say it again and be wrong. This is my least favorite game. Not of all time, but at least on your list.
Yeah, so I like Defender a lot. When I played it on I think I had it for the 7800. I may have had it for the 2600, but I think it was a 7800. And I really like the control scheme for that compared to how difficult it is to play this game.
Yeah, I will definitely say, even though I don't enjoy this game, it's not fun for me. If you are good at this game, you are a very skilled player because it takes a lot of dexterity to be really good at this game. There's several different controls. You're going in multiple directions. Things are coming at you from all ways. It's very fast, and I just was never good at it, which probably means, it's probably an explanation as to why I don't like it.
Now, I did always like the effects of it. I always thought the laser was super cool, but I felt like I get the wanting to differentiate your arcade cabinet from other companies' cabinets, but having the joystick just do up and down, and then a button for thrust and a button for turnaround and stuff like that, just it's unnecessary. It could have just throw a 4-way stick on this cabinet. And then, a smart bomb button and a fire button. That's all you need. All right, let's see if I can
but then it kind of makes it plain Jane if it does that, right? It's the difficulty that makes it appealing to some people.
Yeah, I will say this game, I don't know if it is in fact the first game with a mini map, but I'm going to say it is. And that is, I think that's such a cool thing. You have to have that map to be able to see where the other ships are and where they're grabbing people. I always liked how it looped around on itself too. It made it feel like you're flying around the entire planet. So, but I think that's super important.
Shout out to our buddy Joel in the chat. He also agrees with me that Defender is hard as hell. I'm glad I'm not the only person. I do appreciate this arcade cabinet though. It's also plywood, and made by Williams. It's a little shorter than a lot of cabinets, so it's nice and compact. I like toting it around. It was converted to a lot of different things. You come across Final Fight that was been converted into this cabinet. A lot of different things. This is a Eugene Jarvis game, right?
I believe so. Yeah. let me see if I can get it. Nope. Thought I was going to catch that again. But yeah, I think I understand why it did so well. You know, it was very different from anything that was out at the time. It was very fast compared to other games that were out at the time. So, you know, seeing something new, something that I think helps to make it stand out from the rest of the arcade crowd. So,
yeah, right. A lot of the sounds you'll hear have been reused in different things throughout the years. You can't quite place it, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's Defender. I also liked how the landscape kind of reminded me a little bit of about a vector style of game, with being new. So it, again, even though I don't like it, I think it does deserve its place in history as one of the top 10 selling games of all time.
Yeah. All right. So, Defender, cabinet sold 60,000, right? Check this out. Revenue by 1993. I don't know why it goes up to 1993 when Centipede was only 91. But 1993, $1 billion in sales. And so adjusted for inflation, $1.69 billion in sales with a B. So Defender, pretty hot title.
Yes. Wait, what was the number on that one? Because
Defender, 60,000.
60,000.
60,000.
Okay.
$1 billion in sales. All right, so we've had a pretty good mix of games so far. Outrun, Galaxian, Centipede, Defender, still a space shooter like Galaxian, but different perspective. So number 6, Preston, what do you think the number 6 game is going to be?
I really wish we had gone in reverse and in real number 1 order. Because I feel like I could have done better if we'd have gone that way, because I think I know what the top ones are on that one. I think Asteroids is tops, and then Space Invaders after that, and then Pac-Man, and then Donkey Kong. But, geez, I feel like if I say Street Fighter 2 here, I'm going to be wrong again. But,
yeah, don't say it.
Okay, so I'm not going to say it. How about you? Here's this. Give me a choice of 3. Help me out here, Brian. I've been wrong. Give me 3 options, and I'll pick.
Okay. Before I do that, someone asked, does that include all console ports and re-releases? No, it's just for arcade cabinet sales. All right. Here's the 3 I'm going to give you. We'll say Street Fighter 2.
Okay. But that's a give me, though. You just told me it wasn't that one.
All right.
All right.
Miss Pac-Man, and Asteroids.
Well, I'm going to have to go Miss Pac-Man then.
Miss Pac-Man. Well, the answer is Asteroids.
I suck.
Back-to-back space shooters, but this time you're not saving people, and I guess you do blow up some spaceships in this game, but Asteroids.
I don't know. Dude, I think the article you got is wrong. Asteroids was in 1979. It was the precursor to this game. The most popular game was Pong, right? And Pong's not even on your list. But so this was amazing. When this came out, people were losing their minds at how cool this was.
Yeah.
And it's a top 10 game of all time. Obviously here by sales too, but I just don't think it's coming. What number is this? 6?
Yes, number 6.
Oh, that's lame, man.
What is your strategy for playing Asteroids?
To just die a lot. That's my strategy, because I am not good at it. I do agree that it's probably best to stay in the middle as much as possible.
Yeah.
I think, you just drifted out. I think to try to get back in the middle is probably good. I avoid the hyperspace jump at all times, because that just it'll throw me right into where I don't want to be. But hey, so something to note here for people who may not be quite as well versed in arcade collecting is that this is the first game of our list, and looks like our only game on this list that's a vector game. So it's hard to describe if you don't know the difference already, but compared to an RGB, just CRT, cathode ray tube television, compared to a vector CRT, just the straight lines driven by mathematical formulas. It's very bright. The phosphor glows really, really bright. Seeing these in actual arcade cabinets, it's very identifiable when you see them as compared to other types of gameplay. Like if you play this right now, like in emulation, or if you just played the the console version, it didn't have quite as a visual appeal as it did in the actual arcade cabinet, which is why it's so appealing today for collectors, because you can't replicate that feel in emulation. So as these games are dying out or get converted or get trashed, these monitors are getting harder and harder to find. And it's one of the few that has it.
I was going to say, people talk a lot about like, oh man, like trying to find a CRT for this game or this, or, it's so hard to do that. But like, yeah, going with a vector monitor is like next to impossible. I think it would be interesting to see with HDR, like nowadays. I bet you that you could fake the like how bright and how bold the colors are for a vector monitor. I bet you could make that same type of look with a HDR monitor.
Here's the thing, though.
Yeah,
I'd know in my heart, and it wouldn't be right. In case you're listening and you don't know what I'm talking about, other games that utilize this vector technology, Tempest was one. Sundance is a real obscure game. What were some other vector games? Black Widow, Gravitar,
Commander. Was it Commander Keen? No, not Commander Keen. What is it? There's my favorite vector game is Captain something or Commander something. You know what I'm talking about?
Wow, it's really your favorite.
It is it's my favorite vector game. So there's just not that many of them, but I like that one because it's similar to like Tron, where it has like different game modes while you're playing. So there's like you land on a ship and then you have to like get the reactor core of the ship and then get out and get back in and stuff like that. I wish I could remember.
Oh, I forgot one of the most famous vector games of all time, Star Wars, the original.
Yes. They recently re-released that, or I guess released it in one of those arcade one-up games. So.
Oh yeah, and you could buy it actually had the yoke on it, which was pretty cool.
Yep. And they put one where you can sit down too.
No way.
Yeah. They I mean, it's the same thing. They just kind of added a bench to it or whatever. But
we got some additions here in the chat. We got
Major Havoc.
Baron.
That's it. Yep.
Yep. Major Havoc.
That
one's hard as heck too.
I love
Major Havoc is harder than Defender. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Anyway.
All right. So, give you a little bit of a little bit of numbers here for you. So Asteroids, they sold 100,000 cabinets for this game. The revenue by 1991, it must have been a cheaper game than Defender, because by 91 they had made $800 million off the cabinets. So adjusting for inflation, it's $1.43 billion for Asteroids. So
wow,
you can't charge a premium for a black and white game. That's what I gotta say.
Well, did they adjust for inflation?
Yeah.
Okay.
1.43 billion for inflation. So,
is that all?
Yeah, that's it. Hey, classic game though. All right, so
halfway mark.
Halfway mark. All right, so let me just read out the ones that we still have left. Okay. We have Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and Street Fighter 3. Okay.
Street Fighter 2.
Street Fighter 2. So, which arcade comes in at number 5, Preston?
Okay, so before I say my answer, which is going to be wrong, let me just say, I think the inclusion of Street Fighter 2,
yes,
in this list is bogus, because it was a kit game.
Yeah,
it wasn't sold in an actual dedicated arcade cabinet. It may have like a standard cabinet style that people put it in, like a Dynamo cabinet style, but it wasn't a standard issue cabinet. So I don't know if it's not a good one-to-one comparison. Yeah. So I just don't see how Street Fighter 2 sold more than Pac-Man, sold more than Donkey Kong. But I'm going to go, in this instance, I'm going to say Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong. All right, well, coming in at number 5 is Miss Pac-Man.
Boo.
So, man, the Pac-Man games and, coming with Miss Pac-Man and then later on Baby Pac-Man, so much drama and controversy about the Pac-Man series, especially, ultimately it just all comes down to because of how popular the Pac-Man series was. But man, tell me some of that drama about Miss Pac-Man, Preston. And actually, I'm gonna let you tell me about it, and then we'll cut to that video.
Oh, okay. So Miss Pac-Man, I did a kind of a deep dive study of it back when I first started writing. Shout out to my friend and podcast fan, George El Huapo. He's got his own live stream. He's a streamer now, does his own YouTube channel and all that stuff. So check him out if you can. But he gave me my first paid writing gig for a site that's kind of now defunct called Arcade Sushi.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking for long form essays. And I did a story about the crazy and profitable origins of Miss Pac-Man. And so Miss Pac-Man, interestingly enough, it didn't come about directly from Namco. It didn't come about directly from Bally Midway.
Mm-hmm.
It was an official release by them, but they didn't create it. It was created by guys who started their own company out of their dorm room at MIT. So this kid at MIT, his name was Doug McRae, and he had a little arcade route. He had some games that he put out in operation in the student union or around town, and he saw that games needed to have a longer lifespan than they did. Like, as gameplay progressed over time, the returns would decrease. And so it was his idea to add on to existing board sets to expand and basically make a new game. And his first one that he did that with was Missile Command. He did Super Missile Attack. And what it was, he was very conscious of copyright. He didn't rip the source code and reissue that. What he did was he just made his own ROM that plugged into the existing board set and added new stages and more difficulty and a lot of different options. And so he created the same thing. He saw how profitable that was and saw the potential for that. And he did his own thing for Pac-Man, wherein he added a module that would add new levels, more difficulty, and some variety to the Pac-Man. And it was a game called Crazy Auto. So Miss Pac-Man actually wasn't Miss Pac-Man originally. It was a game called Crazy Auto. And you can see Brian playing some video of it there. It was a character that had legs, a lot different than Pac-Man because like they were trying to consciously be different than Pac-Man. And so they just happened to approach Bally Midway at just the right moment when they didn't have anything in the pipeline for a follow-up to Pac-Man. And so they worked out an agreement and where they licensed it and they got profit sharing and everything. And so this was Miss Pac-Man was a game that started as a bootleg and became one of the most popular and top 10 selling games of all time.
Yeah, I think it's crazy that you have the way Crazy Otto looks. He looks awesome, and it's funny because he actually looks kind of like if you think of like the drawn Pac-Man as like as an actual person, not just like the round circle that he is in the game, but like the actual like drawn out stuff. He looks just like that Pac-Man, like the one that was on the side of the machine with like the 2 feet. So it's funny that they didn't actually like try to go after them and stuff because I guess Midway learned, oh wow, that's a good way to like make a riff on something, and so that's kind of like what they did when they came up with Baby Pac-Man, and then got in trouble from Namco for doing that. So
yeah, it was the Wild West out there back in those early 80s, man.
Yeah, there's so many different arcade mods and that kind of thing where people were just ripping games and then just hacking them and then putting in new chipsets and stuff like that in order to try to like make some extra money, trying to make the game harder and that kind of thing. So, all right, Miss Pac-Man, they sold 125,000 cabinets for that. So the revenue by 1987 is $1.2 billion. So adjusted for inflation, $2.58 billion. So we're starting to get in some pretty heavy hitters here. All right.
So Miss Pac-Man is one of the ones that I don't know if we've come across it yet. Oh yeah, Centipede was that way too, but people may only be familiar with one type of presentation of that arcade cabinet, but know that when we're talking here, we're talking about all versions sold. And Miss Pac-Man you could have as a traditional stand-up arcade unit. You could have a diminutive mini or a cabaret style unit, and then you could also have a cocktail table, which is a tabletop version of that game. And man, one of my I have some games that I regret letting go, and one of them was my very first Miss Pac-Man cocktail table. And the reason I let it go is because it's one of these games that was one of the best selling. So there are plenty of examples out there, and I thought I'll come across it again. And I've actually had several Miss Pac-Man cocktails over the course of my collecting career, but I've never had that very first Pac-Man cocktail, Miss Pac-Man cocktail, wherein it had its life spent in a Pizza Hut. And when it came to me, after you had that game on for about 10 minutes, it would start to heat up, and you'd open that coin door and you would smell Pizza Hut. And it was one of the best, like, nostalgic smells in history. And I let it go. But
boy, it's probably good that you let it go, because you would have probably wound up hating pizza if you played that game too much.
Well, I don't like Pizza Hut anymore, so who knows? Maybe that's why.
It's like when I used to work at Krispy Kreme, and I worked third shift when I first started working there. And one day, my mom came and picked me up after my shift, and we were going to go eat breakfast together. So we went to IHOP, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm going to get all these pancakes and stuff like that." And as soon as they set them down in front of me, it just smelled like donuts, and I couldn't eat them. I was just like, "Oh, this sucks. I can't eat these pancakes." So.
Things are too good. Yep.
Yeah. Top 4, Preston.
Okay.
So just to remind everybody what we got, we have Street Fighter 2, Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, and Pac-Man. What do you think the number 4 game is?
If Pac-Man or Space Invaders isn't number 1, then I don't know what's right with the world. So it has got to be. It has got to be Street Fighter 2 now.
All right.
That's my answer.
Street Fighter 2. Number 4 is Donkey Kong.
This is crap. This is so wrong. I don't believe this at all. That's nuts.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about Donkey Kong, and it is kind of crazy that it's number 4, because I think this game probably has had the most lasting,
cultural relevance.
Yes, out of any of these games on here, because while Pac-Man, is Pac-Man and is like a beast, this game gave us Jumpman at first, but then later on, Mario. So, and these two characters, are still being put into modern games that are still coming out today. All three of these characters on the screen.
Donkey Kong Country series was really big for me in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, not only just the games themselves, but in pop culture in general, with the King of Kong documentary and that whole competitive gaming aspect, which is still in the news today. I mean, we won't go into it, but like you could do a search for Donkey Kong and world records, and there's all kinds of stuff going on even today with this game that came out in 1981 by Nintendo.
Yeah, and my favorite thing about Nintendo games, or I guess Nintendo arcade games, is that their cabinets were so unique. And just like the look of them, and the I love the way that the joystick on those games felt.
I will go to my grave. So this is getting into super arcade nerd territory, and I'm sorry if you're just a regular casual listener of the show and you don't like to go in the weeds with this stuff, but I will go to my grave that the Nintendo cabinet is the best arcade cabinet ever made because of several reasons. Number one, it's plywood, it's short, it's not very heavy. It has handles on the back for you to tip it over. It has wheels on the back for you to be able to move it by yourself. And also because it's the way it's situated, it's flat front. It has a little ledge underneath it. You can even pull it out from the wall by yourself just by tipping it over in the front. Okay. Also, I like how similarly styled they are. So when you have Donkey Kong, a Donkey Kong Jr., a Popeye, you got all of these games that are Nintendo made. You have them all in the row. They look beautiful. They're just solid colored with a little bit of side art, and it's just the artwork package changed, not the cabinet structure. Because when you have perfection, you don't mess with it. Yeah. So I love those. And then an underrated feature of the Nintendo arcade cabinet, it has a flat top so that you can not only place a drink up there, but you can also have it in your arcade and have nice, bountiful decorations to have go in your arcade. And most other systems, arcade cabinets don't have that at all. So
yeah. My favorite part is just the art on the glass on the front of it. So
another little nerd feature that is a little bit of a detraction from it is that it's a Japanese design. So all of the components are designed in metric scale. So your bolts and stuff are all metric.
This is Miyamoto's first game. And so, he's still just, he's a huge prominent figure at Nintendo today, and he still has like a lot of input on the stuff that they make. And so it's crazy to think, his whole thing with this particular game was the size of the characters was different from what you're used to seeing in arcades at the time because he wanted it to have more of a cartoony feel. And so that's why the characters look the way they do and that kind of thing. So, hey, it made a huge impact. They basically had made a game before this that was not popular at all. And so they just changed all those cabinets over to Donkey Kong. And
I actually came across one of those in one of my very first raids, my very first arcade warehouse buyout. I got to have not only Donkey Kong, but I had a Hellafire. And Hellafire is the short-lived game that they use to convert Donkey Kongs to. So if you ever see a Donkey Kong, which is traditionally in a blue cabinet, if you ever come across one that's in a red cabinet, there's a small chance that actually used to be and originally was made to be a Hellafire arcade cabinet. And then when that didn't sell well, they converted it over to Donkey Kong.
Yep. All right. It's Donkey Kong. Huge hitter. All right.
It is.
We have 3 games left. We have... Oh, wait. Hold on. I forgot to tell you how much it made. All right. So Donkey Kong, they sold 132,000 cabinets. Revenue by 1982, right? So Donkey Kong came out in 81.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah. And Donkey Kong came out in 81. And by 82, they had already done $280 million in sales for Donkey Kong, which adjusted for inflation is $710.2 million. So Donkey Kong, huge impact in the arcades.
Yeah, I feel like they needed to have a better comparison year.
They should have all had the same date.
Yeah. But if that's it in only 1 year, I can imagine how if we're comparing it out to like 91, the lifetime of these things. Yeah, very, very a big earner. Okay, so we have 3 left.
Yeah,
right?
3 left.
Okay, I'm just gonna ride this wave until it crashes all the way to the ground, which is I'm gonna go Street Fighter 2.
All right, well, Preston, you think Street Fighter 2 made it to number 3? It is number 3.
Finally! Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. It made it this hard. This far.
This is the 3rd game you've gotten right. I think it was.
This is officially the worst game that I've played.
All right, so Street Fighter 2, you are very good at Street Fighter 2 with Chun-Li. I remember the first time you and I played this game together, I was shocked with how good you were with Chun-Li. But tell me a little bit about Street Fighter 2.
So I don't know about history. I just go on personal experience. Street Fighter 2 was a seminal game for me. It was a game that, as we know, totally revitalized the arcades, which had been dying. There was a huge crash in 1983, 84. And then, it was going and chugging along at this much, much, much lower level. And was starting to die off. But then when this game came out, it was lighting a fire in the arcades. We had an arcade that was in the back of this corner store that you could ride our bikes to. And when this game came out, you were, people, 3-4 people deep waiting to play this game so you could have your turn to beat butt against the player next to you.
Yeah.
This is the game for me that introduced me to the concept of putting a quarter on the ledge of the machine, saying that I've got dibs, I've got next to save your spot, because it was so popular. Interestingly enough, the title says it's part 2, but there was actually a Street Fighter 1 that came out before this that most people don't remember because it was not nearly as good as this one.
It was very bad. It wasn't just this is a bad game, based off of options for your fighter and stuff. Everything about it was so bad. The controller, just the inputs, there was so much lag in between inputs and trying to get your special moves off and stuff like that. It was such a horrible game. So it's crazy to think that going from part 1 to this game, how big of a difference it was. And like you said, this game saved arcades. It was a huge deal, and it changed arcade gaming forever, because once this game came out, you started having a lot of people that started coming out with knockoffs for it, and trying to cash in a little bit on the hype of the Street Fighter or the fighting game genre. So
right. So I mentioned it earlier when I was griping and complaining about how this shouldn't be included in the list, but so this game is a kit game. If you're not familiar with that concept, a conversion kit is what is sent to operators when they want to take an existing cabinet and they just need to swap out the inside. So they're keeping the wooden structure, they're keeping the TV tube, but they want to change out the circuit board, the control panel artwork, the marquee artwork, and the side art, and it will just become a new game. And so that's probably one of the reasons why it ranked as high as it did, because they're counting conversion game kits, which were a lot cheaper than a whole arcade unit to buy for operators. And that also made it easy to swap out when those new editions that Brian was talking about came out. So this one, it went fast. It was Street Fighter 2 Championship. Street Fighter 2, The World Warrior. That was the very first original one. And then they had Champion Edition. Then they had Hyper Fighting. Then they had Rainbow Edition, which was a bootleg. Then they had Super Duper. It started going off the ledges, off the rails with how many different editions they have. But so I don't know if they're including those in those counts, or if they're just including the original World Warrior. But regardless, it was a force.
Yeah, I will say, coming back to this version of Street Fighter 2, because Street Fighter 2, Hyper Fighting or Turbo Edition was the only edition that I really spent a lot of time with, and so playing how slow this game is driving me crazy. But
I'll say the appeal of this game was multiple, in that not only could you fight someone you could fight the computer, also it was head to head. So me as a 12-year-old kid, I could fight some guy in college and beat him and feel oh my gosh, I'm the king of the world. You had that, but you also had the different characters to choose from, which I don't forget the number. I can't tell you the number right at the top of my head, but it's a decent number of character selections. And then they had you could progress through the levels to achieve different difficulty levels. But it's just the variety. I know where I was going to go. The fact that you could be really, really, really good and precise and learn moves. Each character had a different move set that you could become proficient in, was really cool. But also, if you're just starting out and you can just mash buttons and still have a really, really, really good time. You don't have to know what you're doing. You could still just be a button masher and stumble into some of those moves. Always discovering those was really exciting. And this was kind of the first place where you could do that. So Street Fighter 2 deserves all the props it does.
to give you the numbers for Street Fighter 2, cabinets sold 200,000. Okay. Now, I will say it's a little bit of a cheat because it was 60,000 for Street Fighter 2 and then 140,000 for Championship Edition, which Championship Edition added in the 4 bosses and stuff like that. So, revenue by 1995 was $2.31 billion, and then adjusted for inflation, that makes it $3.71 billion. So,
wow.
Changed everything, man. And, you know, I bet the whole reason that they did the conversion kits like that was probably because the first game just wasn't as popular, and so they probably didn't want to sink the money into making cabinets for this game, just in case it wasn't popular too. So, yeah,
this is one that I have in my basement, and even though a lot of the Street Fighters are Championship Edition or other editions, I've kept it to be the World Warrior, the original one, because that's the one that impacted me when I was a kid. It really, really hooked me into the hobby. And even though I really enjoy refurbishing my games and having like brand new reproduction artwork on them so they look like they're factory fresh, this one has cigarette burns and all, and I'm not changing a thing. It looks like it came out of hell, just like the one that was in that back corner store. So I'm preserving that history with the one that's in my basement, and it is a top 3 game for me. Maybe my favorite game as far as arcades go of all time.
Well, that's perfect because it was a top 3 game here. So, but that means there's only 2 left. And I don't know. Do you know the number 1 game just like based off of like arcade history?
I think it's Space Invaders.
Okay. Well, so then I guess that makes the number 2 pick here an easy one for you. So what do you think? Number 2 is Pac-Man, is what Preston says. But unfortunately, it is Space Invaders. and I have, what we're doing here is I'm playing part 2, which is technically Space Invaders Deluxe, which was, you were talking about earlier how there were black and white games and they just did an overlay to make it color. And so Space Invaders Deluxe was that style of color game. So, if you remembered this game being color, that's why. So
Space Invaders came out in what, 1978? I believe.
I think so. Yeah. That sounds right.
It came out, and it was there was a couple of different cabinet editions. It's a Taito game, and it had a really cool cabinet. It was plywood as well, but it used a mirror to project it, so that the TV actually sat like horizontal to the ground, facing up, and then a mirror projected it on. It had a really cool like cardboard backdrop to add some, texture to it to make it look like it was on the surface of a planet. Had like neon cardboard cutouts, which was pretty cool. Yeah, it's a very unique cabinet that I don't think they ever made anything else like it. But the reason I picked this as number 1, is because I know there's Pac-Man Fever, and I know that was like a monumental game. But I'm surprised, going back to like how I'm surprised that Asteroids wasn't higher than it was. When Pong hit, it was crazy. When Space Invaders hit, it was bananas. Like people loved this game, and it was so novel and new at the time. Like they couldn't crank these out fast enough. So, and since it was one of the first, I thought it would be much higher. Well, not much higher, but I thought it'd be the number 1. It's like even though it doesn't have quite as much like cultural cachet as Pac-Man, it's one of those games where people know Space Invaders. You could be like a grandma and have heard of Space Invaders.
Yes. Yeah. And we have someone saying that they have that one. The reflective background is great. I don't remember where it was, but I heard like when they were talking about coming up with that idea, they were at, they were outside the office, like eating or something like that. And somebody noticed something in a reflection. And this is some story that I had heard, but in actuality, it was probably just because of like the older style, like shooting games and stuff. And a lot of those older style arcade games that used physical products, were all done that way. But, they had noticed the way a reflection looked in something, and so they thought it'd be a cool idea to put it in the game like that as well.
Oh, it's awesome. And like that effect works really, really well. I've got another game called Warlords in my basement that has that effect. And, you know, it's innovative because it's primitive, but they were able to use such a primitive thing to enhance the technology of the time. So like these things were state of the art, you know, video arcade cabinets were state of the art, but compared to now, it seems really, really primitive. But they were able to take something that they had limitations with and expand on that with some real world, like physical decorations and stuff to enhance the playability. And I love that creative genius.
Yeah, and it is so iconic, like the way that the invaders look, and then I love the artwork on the side of the cabinet. So Space Invaders, 360,000 cabinets sold. The revenue by 1982. So we're doing another 1982 for some reason. The revenue by 1982 though was $2.7 billion, just in like 3 years, right, or 4 years. So adjusted for inflation, that's $6.85 billion for Space Invaders, which leaves just one game for the number one, Preston.
All right, I'm going to go Street Fighter 2.
You wish. It is Pac-Man. So, this game, huge hit. There are tons of games. If you think, we were talking earlier about how iconic Donkey Kong and Mario and stuff is, they didn't have as many different arcade games as Pac-Man did, because there were just so many spin-offs. You had the cartoon shows. I had, like I said, all the Pac-Man sheets and everything when I was a kid. I had Pac-Man color forms. Pac-Man, man, such a huge game.
Yeah, it really was Pac-Man fever back then. And even though Brian was listing all that stuff, all the different iterations of Pac-Man and all the merchandising and stuff, like it got number one as far as the best-selling arcade game just for this one title, the original release. Yep. And it sold... how many did it sell, Brian? I want to say 400,000 units.
It was 400,000 units. So the revenue by 1985 was $3.5 billion. So adjusted for inflation, that's $7.96 billion. So
that's cool.
I remember hearing stories about this game. Like, people kept thinking, like operators kept thinking that they were breaking because, like the coin mechs and stuff like that weren't accepting money, and what happened is people were just playing this game so much that they would instantly fill it up with quarters. So like if you had a Pac-Man back then,
that's a lot of quarters too, because I have come across arcade games that still had a lot of quarters in their buckets in those midway cabinets. My very first Galaga that I bought had a ton of coins still in there, and it totaled up to be over $400, and that wasn't even full. Yeah. And that's in quarters. So that's a ton of quarters to make a game break like that. Yeah. And they were just earning.
I can't even imagine having like the feel of owning this game. And it's like, I'm sure that there's plenty of places that just had like 3 of them side by side and just constantly having to take the quarters out because they were just jam packed.
Well, and it's crazy too. Unless you're an enthusiast like we are, you may not know. If you're just a casual fan of Pac-Man, then when you're playing, you're like, oh, I'm doing really good. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm 15 levels in. I'm doing really good. There are 256 levels on this thing before it just breaks. Yeah. So, it would eat quarters and eat quarters and eat quarters because the game essentially seemed like it never ended. Yeah.
So what I'm doing right now is a trick. So let's say you're awesome at Pac-Man. You can just park Pac-Man right... Oh, never mind. It's not there. There's a spot. That was awesome. There's a spot. I thought it was right there. I could have sworn that was it. Oh, you know what? This is the 30th anniversary of Pac-Man. It's a different ROM. So I wonder if they changed it. I could have sworn that was a spot. It was either there or there.
Excuses.
Hey, you can park Pac-Man in one of those 2 spots, and the ghost won't attack him.
I've seen this done by an expert in person.
So, It was perfect timing too, because I had been sitting there for a while. But
That's great.
yeah, the is
I
this
will
your
say-
favorite version of Pac-Man?
No, it's got to be Miss Pac-Man because, and when I say Miss Pac-Man, I'm speaking specifically about Miss Pac-Man with the speed chip. Regular Pac-Man, hey, all props for where it deserves its place in history, but it's just not as much fun as Miss Pac-Man Fast. I like to move it.
Yeah, and a lot of arcade games, the second iteration was typically something like that, where it would be a faster version of the game or something like that.
It's kind of like record albums, right? When groups come out, it's the second album that's the one that really sticks.
I guess it's in Miss Pac-Man. So the cutscenes in the Pac games were one of my favorite things about them when I was a kid, and I think it's a Miss Pac-Man because it's when they meet or whatever. There's one of the cutscenes where one of the ghosts gets caught on a nail and it rips and you see a human leg sticking out of it. So the ghosts are actually humans under cloths. What do you think about that, Preston?
That's some nightmare fuel right there, man. I don't know that I can handle dealing with that.
Yeah. Well, those are the top 10 selling arcade games in order from 10 to 1. So next time someone asks, the Outrun came out for number 10.
Yeah,
Street
I do.
Street Fighter's number 3. So now Preston. Street Fighter's
I'm
number
gonna have
3.
to go look up some numbers. I have some arguments with these facts, but anyway, it was fun regardless, and it just makes me itching to want to go out and go to visit a local arcade bar and play in person. And that's part of why, like at the top of the show, I mentioned one of the reasons we're talking about arcade games because, even though different localities and municipalities are opening back up, businesses, one of the last things that will ever be opened up are in-person arcades. And, it's a slice of life that you really appreciate when it's gone. And I'm glad that it wasn't gone forever, that it has been experiencing a resurgence. But now when you're limited and prohibited from going, it really makes you pine for the good old days. So here's to those arcade owners and operators that are still hoofing it out. I hope they get back on their feet soon and are anxious to accept quarters.
Yeah, I know one of the ones up in our area, Portal Pinball, they're opening up soon. So, hey, you can get out there, support your local ones that are opening because, it takes a lot of, especially right now, a lot of effort in order to keep the games clean and keep that safe for everybody. So, if there's a way for you to support, let's say you can't get to an arcade, your local one, try to find another way to support them. So.
Hey, speaking of support, we always appreciate your support, and thank you for listening to the show. For those of you who are still sticking around in the Twitch, which, like we mentioned before, is our very first inaugural Twitch live stream, hit me up. You can email us or hit me up on social. I'd love to give you guys, each who are watching right now with us, a free sticker. I'd be happy to mail that to you. And those of you who are listening or watching us on YouTube after the live stream, I want to extend that offer. If you go and review us on iTunes, shoot us a message that you did so, give us a little screenshot, and I'll be happy to send you a sticker. Thank you guys for following us on this podcast journey. It's been fun. My name is Preston Burt. You can find me at Squared Stiff on Twitter and Instagram. Ryan, where can find you?
You can find me at BE Grantham on Twitter. You can shoot the show an email at waybackattackshow@gmail.com if you have any questions or anything, or just want to shoot us some info, maybe maybe your favorite game was on this list and you want to tell us a story about that. We love reading the emails that people send us. Want to make sure that you have that email address. So, and like Preston said, we appreciate it whenever you leave us feedback and that kind of thing so that we know what you guys like. And, we've gotten a pretty good bit of show ideas for upcoming shows. And so we'd like it if you have any thoughts or anything that you want, just make sure you reach out to us and let us know.
So. We've got, like Brian said, we got some plenty of good ideas for future shows. If you want to find us in the future, we're going to be streaming on Twitch Tuesday nights, and then releasing the show for Wayback Wednesdays on YouTube and on Podcast RSS. We're here weekly, and we'll see you next time.